Hey, hi, this is Sandeep, and in this tutorial I'll be covering business group unit, business logic groups basically. Okay, so I'll explain this with the help of an example. So let's see here, I have created a table called as EMP details, and these are actually the sample data that is I have populated it with two email IDs and their departments and their salary. Okay, so this is how it has been populated. This is the primary key, and this is not null, this is also not null, and this is also not null. So this is basically defined on the DB level. These constraints have been defined on the DB level. Now I have created the EO and VO over the same table in JDAV, in ADF. Okay, so let's say that we want to have some validation rules over this attribute. Okay, so we want to have at the rate, let's apply some validation rule on email. Okay, so here you have got you can go in validation from here, or what you can do, you can just select this and go from here. Right now it has 2, that is not null, and its precision, that is its length, should be 20. So these are actually derived from the DB. Whatever constraint existed for this column in the DB, the same kind of constraints are existing here as validation rules. Okay, so I'm gonna add more validation rule to it, and I want to say that it should have at the rate. Okay, so here's the type. So we can go with the regular expression for this. We have a number of options available here. We can go with the regular expression, but the same can be achieved with the help of method. Let's say I want to have a method. So this will say that I will define the validation rule inside the method, whose name will be this. Okay, and that will be present, this method name will be present in the implementation, in the entity implementation class that we will just see in 2 minutes. So we will get whatsoever logic inside this method. I will just show you. The error method that we want to display is, if at the rate is not present in email should have the symbol. So this is what we gonna have. So let's say okay, and it will ask you the entity Java file does not exist. Do you want to create default? I mean, it is asking me that right now Java file for this entity object doesn't exist, so do I need to create it? I will say yes, and okay. So if you see, if you go in the Java tab now, here is this class created. If you click on it, you can go on it. Here is your class. So right now it has got this method validate email. Okay, so right now it is returning us true. We need to check, we will get the email from the user and we need to check whether it's valid or not, right? So we can have this logic over here. This kind of logic is what it says. It says that if email contains the symbol, then I have to return true, that is the validation passes, else I will return false, that means the validation fails. So if the validation passes, all goes well. Otherwise, what will happen if the validation fails? Let me go over here in validation. This method is there, which is appearing right now here. So if the if the validation fails, then this error message will be displayed. Okay, so we have applied one validation on email. Let's say we want to have something in department. You go to validation, add it, and I want to say that the department should have only 2 departments. One is IT and one is automobile. Okay, so you have to select list here, and you have to put a list of the things whatever you want. So I have put IT and automobile. So these 2, any one of these 2 can be present. Apart from these, anything else is not acceptable in the departments. Now failure, if it fails, if the validation fails, then I have to display a message which would say department should be IT or automobile. Okay, so we have applied now this rule over here. Okay, so we'll just check this whether these rules are working fine or not. I will just run it. Here is your output, and let's say I want to add one new record. I will say amit@gmail.com. okay, so let's say I don't have @. If I put it here, it will throw exception at the validation rule. Email should have this symbol, right? So I should have @, so that proves that our validation rule is working fine. Now department, let's say I put it as auto and I forgot to put mobile. Again it will say department should be IT or automobile, so I have to correct it. Okay, now salary, let's say 24,000. okay, so just validate it and commit it. Okay, so these changes have now gone to the table. If you want to see the table over here, you can just refresh it and the changes should be reflected over here. So as you see that the data has been populated over here. Now the thing is, we have defined a couple of validation rule over here, but now what can happen is that, let's say we want to define one rule on salary. Okay, here, so we can go in the validation rule and we can say validation rule for salary. I will just add one validation rule and I will say that I need to compare and it should be greater than, at least it should be greater than 10,000. okay, let's say it should be greater than 10,000. The salary of an employee should actually be greater than 10,000, or I want to say I want to say a range. Okay, I want to say the employee salary should be between 10,000 or 1 lakh. Okay, so this is what I want to say, and in failure handling I would say sal should be in range of 10,000 to 1 lakh. Okay, so this validation rule I have put it over here. Okay, but now this will also run accordingly as you have put it here, as the other validation rules were working. Now let's say that we want to have a twist. We want to define the salary based on the department. Let's say that for IT department we want the salary to be greater than 30,000, and for the automobile department we want to have salary less than 30,000, right? So basically this kind of a validation check is dependent on the department, right? So salary is basically dependent on the department for performing this kind of a validation. So if this kind of a validation you have to do wherein there is a dependency that is based on some other attribute, you have to define the validation rule, then you will go with business logic groups. Okay, so for business logic groups, what we will do, we will go to the general tab, we will see business logic group, and we will add one business logic group over here. So it will ask you that what is the group name that you want to, and what is the group discriminator attribute. Okay, so group discriminator attribute is the same attribute based on which you are going to define your validation rule. So as I told you that it will be department, based on the department only you will define the ranges in the salary, right? So the discriminator attribute will be department, and let's say I want to name it as department BG, business group. Okay, so now I have added it, and its discriminator attribute is department. Now that you have defined business logic group and its discriminator attribute is department, now based on each and every possible value which department attribute can take, you can define those many number of business unit, basically business logic unit. Okay, so here whatever we have in department, we have got IT and automobile, so we can define two business logic units on this business logic group. if we had 3 possible values or 10 possible values, then those many business logic units can be defined. So here we have defined one business logic group, and based on this business logic, now we are gonna create one business logic unit. So you have to go to the employee details, you right click it, and now you will find a new option over here which will be new entity business logic unit. If you click on it, it will ask you the entity name, and this is the business logic group under which this will be defined, and it will ask you the unit name. So you need to give that value over here for which is there in the department. For example, I want to define a rule based on IT, right? And on the automobile also we need to define one more rule. So the department column will have this value department, or will have automobile as the value. So unit name basically needs to be the same value which would be contained under the discriminator attribute. Okay, so here I have got this IT. I'm going to define for IT. So let's say okay. So here it has generated for me a business logic unit. If you go on the attributes, it's all same. Okay, it's all same, that is of the employees EO, and these attributes actually have been extended over here. Now what you can do, this is telling you that this is the business logic unit for IT only. Okay, so these all records, whatever you define over here, okay, like validation rules or control hints or label tooltip, whatever you define over here will be actually applied to those records which will have department as IT. Okay, so let's say I want to modify, I want to say salary. Okay, the salary, see, you cannot make any right now, anything is not possible to edit over here, everything is disabled. So let's say you want to do something for salary, so it is extended, you have to click it, override. Now it is overridden, now everything is possible, you can define new validation rules. So whatever validation rule was earlier, okay, that has been extended, plus you can override also. Okay, so we have already said that the salary should be between 10,000 and 1 lakh, it will be there. Now additional to that, you can override the rules over here, and that will be applied only to those records which will have IT as the department. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a validation rule, and I will say for IT the salary should be greater than or equal to 30,000, and I want to give the message IT employee salary should be greater than or equal to this 30,000. Okay, so that's what I want. So this rule has been applied only to the record which has this IT. Now let's say what we want, we can double click it, and we can go in the validation and control hints. So in control hints, let's say I want to display the salary as your salary. It actually it is extended over here, so it will display whatever was displayed underneath, that is whatever was displayed under employees EU, and over there it was simply salary. I want to override it over here. So salary, I will write your salary from IT. Okay, and tooltip I want to say this is the salary of an IT employee. Okay, so if you have defined all these things, whatever you have defined these things under the EO, that is being overridden over here, that will be contained, and if you override it, then this will be followed in those records in which department is IT. If you apply it and click OK, so all these things have been applied. So let's go ahead and run our application. Here is our output, and you can scroll through the records, and as you see, as I'm scrolling through, see, this is automobile. If I go here, this is IT. So for this record, this is a record which has department as the IT. This is present, this got changed because we have overridden it over here in the business group unit, right, in the business logic unit. So this has been overridden. Plus, if you just hover the mouse over here, you will see this is the salary of an IT employee. So this was the tooltip which has been overridden over here. So if you want to add one more record, you can say new at the rate of gmail.com. Okay, and if you don't apply this at the rate, and if you try to change, see, it throws the same error which for which validation rule has been defined under the EO directly. So those rules will also work, and apart from that, whatever you have overridden, those will work. So let's say I want to have IT department. So as you click here, this got changed, your salary from IT, because this kind of rule, this kind of label was put only for those where the department is IT. So now you can say, if you say, let's say 20,000, right? But we defined a validation rule that if the department is IT, then salary should be greater than 30,000. So it will actually throw you a validation error. Actually, it's not showing me that validation rule which we applied. So let's check whatever we have done. In the salary, we have the validation rule over here. Oh, it is actually less than or equal to. We want it to be greater than or equal to. So I'll just change this and rerun it. So here is your output, and I want to add one more record in order to check the functionality. And department is IT. Now salary, if you say 20,000, then if you try to validate it, or if you just change or tab it, then it should throw you a validation error. See, salary rule, IT employee salary should be greater than or equal to this. So if you have greater than this, then it's all fine, it's validated fine. But if also you remember that the salary should be in the range of 10,000 to 1 lakh, which we defined in the EO level. Okay, at the EO level we defined that attribute, so that will also work over here. If you want to give the salary as 3 lakh, which is out of range, right? Because you defined a rule in the EO saying that the salary should not be, should be in the range of 10,000 and 1 lakh. So this is something out of range. So if you just tab it, salary should be in range of this. So now the validation rule which was existing in the EO level, which we defined under the EO, that is also running fine. So as a summary, I'll just recover all the things. So for basically those kinds of validations which are based on an attribute, for example based on the value of some attribute, you are going to define validation rule on some other attribute. For those purposes, business logic groups are used. So for those, you will just come over here in the entity object, in the general tab, you will just add over here, and it will actually ask you about group discriminator attribute, that is to say, or based on which attribute, based on which kind of a discriminator column you need to define the rule. So we selected it as department, and then whatsoever possible values of the department may be, that many business logic units can be defined under this business logic group. So we had right now only IT and automobile. So I have defined for IT. You can go ahead again and define something new for automobile. Just similarly, you can just right click and new entity business logic group. Here you can write automobile. Okay, automobile, right? And if you click OK, it will be generated for you. Now you have got whole bunch of the attributes over here. So those are right now extended from the EO. Now if you want to define a new validation rule for salary, see, this is basically extended. These all attributes are extended from the EO, but whatever you define over here, it's a separate file that has been generated for automobile and for IT. They are two business logic units. These are separate files basically. Okay, so this will, whatever attributes or whatever rules you define over here, this will be specific to those records which have department as automobile, and these rules or these label or tool tip or whatsoever you define under this will be specific to those records which have the department as IT. Okay, so that is somewhat, I think I was able to explain you well about the business logic groups and business logic units. I'll see you in the next tutorial.